knows. Mandalas are knowable by anyone in the world, whether they come from an American Indian or from somebody in India or Egypt or Denmark. The language is universal, known. This is why Fromm calls it a forgotten language, and one book by that same title, The Forgotten Language. Once we knew it, now we've lost it. We have deliberately lost it and forgotten it. But anyone who wants to can pick it up and read it. You know about child drawings? They've been analyzed lately, and children all over the world do the same thing in their drawings. All over the world. Is that accidental? They didn't learn from each other. They're pulling out of a deep past as children. Something that was common to all of us and is common. And as we grow older, of course, we lose that capacity because we cover up from the first day on. You know about poetic insights. I gave you that thing from Kazantzakis. You could find them almost anywhere, these poets who know. Let me just run over 2 or 3 definitions of poetry. You won't remember them, but you'll get the impact of them. Poetry essentially is not just putting words that rhyme together, you see. It's not making something nice. Not making a motto that you can put on your desk. It's expressing those things out of the intuitions and if you allow me the term, the instincts. Says Carl Jung, poetry is the echo of the primitive through our veil of words. What a beautiful description. The echo of the primitive. T.S. Eliot says, poetry is making words after speech reach into silence. Amy Lowell says, I meet poems where they touch my consciousness, and that is already well along on the road of evolution. Well along by the time it gets to her consciousness where she meets it. Maybe she's just a mystic talking, but I could confirm this and dozens of times over. D.H. Lawrence says the same thing in another way. He says, theorize all you like, but when you start to compose, shut your theoretic eyes and go for it with instinct and intuition. Well, I've talked about dreams, psychoanalysis, mandalas, child drawings, poetic insights, and then I add, of course, fairy tales and myths, with which this series will mostly be concerned. These fairy tales are also universal. They are perpetuated from one unconsciousness to another in words that are beautifully used to veil the instincts and the intuitions and the wisdom to get by the censor. You can read them as simple stories as you read poetry to get words rhyming with each other, but you miss them if that's all you get. They don't last for centuries and go on for myriads of children wanting to hear them over and over and over again unless there's something basic in there that comes from further back than that child's days on earth or that child's experience. I want to talk now a word on myths, and next week I shall talk to you on fairy tales. Myths are very old, and they are a very common universal language. They deal with common forms, common subjects, and a common language. Myths like mandalas are familiar, readable, knowable, understandable by anyone, anywhere in the world, regardless of their immediate past cultural history or their current activities, who has the wit to understand himself and to probe into what moves in him below his awareness. Any myth, anywhere in the world, is understandable. They have the same language and they're talking about the same thing. Whether that myth is Hebraic or Chinese. Listen to this description of myth by Joseph Campbell, who is what, by all odds, the most experienced and knowledgeable in this subject, I think, certainly in this country and maybe in the world. Myth is the dramatic representation of our deepest instinctual life. Say it again. Myth is the dramatic representation of our deepest instinctual life, of a primary awareness of man in the universe. A primary awareness of man in the universe. Listen to this description from another person. Myth is a formula into which life flows as it realizes its traits out of the unconscious. Listen to this from Joseph Campbell again. Every people has received its own seal and sign of superior designation, communicated to its heroes and daily proved in the lives and experiences of its folk. And though many who bow with closed eyes in the sanctuaries of their own tradition, like us here in this church, rationally scrutinize and disqualify the sacraments of others, an honest comparison immediately reveals that all have been built from the one fund of mythological motifs, variously selected, organized, interpreted, and ritualized according to local need, but revered by every people on earth. We have a common history. We have a common physiology. We have common problems. We have a common language, the language of symbol that speaks of this common ancestry and heritage and history in ways that allow you, if you wish, I keep repeating, to avoid, but which, if you wish, will open up to you the unplumbed and unknown mysteries of the past. What are these common subjects? We'll be dealing with some of them in the course of this series. They're what Jung and others call the archetypes. And this is a realm that we're just beginning to move on. So little work done in this area by any scholars anywhere. One of the reasons for my timidity in approaching it. But these archetypes are there within us, these images. They're lower than the archetypal ideas. There are images in there which are common to all of us and which every people in the world has in some way or other tried to express and to describe. These are some of those, and these are perhaps the main ones. Stories of birth and origin, expressing these archetypes which lie behind the story. The story is a way of trying to describe.